these treatments, and he's still involved in legal battles with the government. But again, to be clear, these boxers are not transgender cases, no suggestion of that. Are they DSD cases? Possibly. It's being speculated that they might be. That's been fueled by the IBA, which has referred to them both having XY chromosomes, and the IOC, who in a gaffe initially denied that this was a DSD case, but then had to retract their statement saying that they wanted to say it wasn't actually a transgender case. But we just don't know in truth what exactly the test showed, because the boxers can't reveal all the details. But I think they need to be crucial, regardless of the character. Some people will be effectively male boxers. Others insist they are women, and point to the fact that the genetic variations can be so rare, it's impossible to establish that everyone with one chromosome is male. Amid all of that debate, what it has reminded, I think, people is that the IOC, their policy is to effectively farm out decisions over gender eligibility policy to respective sports. They made this decision some years ago to do that. And that their policy is to effectively accept that what is written on a passport and a birth certificate is key, rather than have the kind of policy that I just mentioned about World Athletics has. Now that they're having to organise the boxing competition, maybe that approach has come under renewed scrutiny. And so whether or not these fighters are DSD, we don't know. For many, this has become a test case, I think, now for the IOC's ability and willingness to govern and protect the female category in sport.
We know that the International Boxing Agency, the IBA, had a press conference on Tuesday about the issue. What happened there?
Well, I think in fairness, it led to more questions than answers, really. It was a somewhat chaotic press conference last night. It was announced that sound issues. The IBA president, Kremlin, called the Life Foundation, went on the ground to tackle the IOC president, Thomas Bach. There were somewhat conflicting statements from members of the IBA. Kremlin said that tests have shown that boxers had high levels of testosterone without providing further details. The former chief doctor said that testosterone had not been tested for. But amid that confusion, there were some details in the image too. The IBA said that 2 tests had been conducted on these fighters in 2022 and 2023 that had been looked at by accredited labs, that the results of these chromosome tests demonstrated that both were ineligible, they said, in genetically male. The president, Kremlin, branded Khalid from women, both men. Further, it said that the IOC had been informed of these results a year ago, but had done nothing. And it said that it was prevented from revealing any more of the tests because the Algerian and Taiwanese Olympians had written to them ordering them not to do so. But I think it's really important maybe to add that I think some of the confusion around this stems from the row between the IBA and the IOC. The IOC has questioned the validity of these tests, saying they were arbitrary and sudden. After the boxers have been allowed to fight for years, they've been developed the process. They've hinted at the IBA's complaints being part of a broader campaign aimed at undermining these Olympics, which of course Russia is banned from due to the war in Ukraine. The IOC says the IBA is discredited, it's compromised. The IBA, however, denies all this, saying that it's simply trying to protect women's sport. But this war of words obviously makes it harder for those of us who are trying to cover it to know exactly what the truth is here.
Yeah, and what about the 2 women at the heart of this, the athletes themselves? What have they said about the situation?
Well, Khalif, they both find themselves in the middle of a global controversy with their genetic makeup and biological sex being scrutinised, and it obviously is very, very difficult for those 2 individuals. Khalif has said that she wants people to refrain from bullying and online abuse because it can be very damaging. She said the fraud is having huge effects and has called for restraint. I want to tell the entire world that I'm female, she said, and I'll remain a female. Algeria's Olympic Committee has supported her, of course, and they've attacked what they call malicious, unethical abuse directed at her. Lynn hasn't said as much. I've covered both of their fights, and I've spoken to both of them briefly, and I've seen the scrutiny that both are under. But I think both are trying to focus on their fighting and boxing, and of course, they're now just one win away from gold in both cases.
And what about the crowds at the matches? Has it changed the support the 2 boxers are getting?
Yeah, I have detected a slight shift. I think at the very beginning, amid the initial storm, both fighters, when they emerged, and I observed it at close quarters, there were boos and cheers from their respective national supporters. But I think as this has continued, and the war of words between the IBA and the IOC has continued, there's been growing sympathy for both of them for finding themselves in a situation such as this. But equally, of course, it should be said there's sympathy for the fighters that they have to face, given the fact that they were deemed ineligible just last year.
Well, what do you think is going to happen with this round? Will there be any changes by the IOC?
That's interesting. I mean, there's no doubt that this has created a huge impact. It's overshadowed the boxing competition here. It's increased the scrutiny, not just on those fighters, but on the IOC itself. It's swept across social media. We've had very significant figures and voices waving in. Former President Donald Trump, for example, is among those. And in fact, the fighters themselves have faced protests from those their opponents in some quarters. And so it has tarnished, I think, the boxing competition, and I think it has forced the IOC to sort of answer some pretty difficult questions. I think, going forward, it could well be that a new governing body emerges, and that this responsibility for organising the boxing competition is lifted away from the IOC. I'm sure it hopes that's the case. It has said that it's open to solutions when it comes to eligibility criteria in this area, but it maintains that it's very difficult and complex to do that. Others disagree with that, of course, and we'll come on to that in a second. But I think regardless, they're going to come under more and more pressure, especially if these two fighters win gold over the next 2 days, to do more research, first and foremost, and perhaps to bring back sex tests for all competitors. Now, the IOC says it doesn't want to do that. It says that no one wants to do that, as it puts it. It's very much opposed to it. And it's warned against stigmatising the two fighters with sex screening. But, campaigning believe the IOC is going to be neglected. And that the overwhelming majority of women athletes, they say, are in favour of what they regard as a relatively simple swab test, a cheap swab test. And they're calling now for mandatory sex testing at the next Olympics, including the UN Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and Girls. But, it has to be said that even within the scientific community, there is disagreement about whether those kind of tests would really allow physiologists to reach a really firm conclusion on someone's sex and whatever advantage they may have. Because some scientists argue that to really be sure, you have to test for genetics and hormones and the body's reaction to those hormones, such as obviously testosterone. So this is the source of much debate. It's expensive to do, it requires expertise, and I get the impression the IOC are wary of doing it. But of course, the obvious pushback against the IOC is, well, if World Athletics can do it, and have been so firm in their belief that this is required, then why can't the IOC? But what's clear is that this controversy is not going away. So.
And in the meantime, the two of them have to focus on the two big fights that we've got coming up and going for gold. Dan, thank you so much for speaking to me. Dan Rowan in Paris there, and of course the BBC coverage of the Paris 2024 Olympic Games continues throughout today and across the weekend on TV, on the radio and on BBC Sounds and iPlayer. I asked you at the beginning of the programme if you'd gone through a breakup or a divorce, what happened to your friends. Had a couple of messages here, said we had a wide group of friends stemming mainly from my husband's time at university. I was close to some of the wives, one in particular. When we split, I lost the whole group. The woman I was close to made a conscious decision to align herself with my ex and actually made the process even more painful for me. I have a wonderful group of girlfriends in my own right and a best friend who is just amazing, always there for me since we were at school, so I consider myself very lucky. And another one here says, I was divorced over 30 years ago and a lot of our friends were couples. I decided I didn't want to lose their friendship, and that Christmas invited them all to go out for a meal together. It was awkward at first, but we have all remained close friends and many more meals out and even holidaying together. It was the best thing I ever did. 84844. Well, on to my next guest. Lottie Tomlinson rose to fame as the younger sister of One Direction's Chloe Tomlinson. At 16, she went on tour with the band, Lottie was written about her experience of grief and her movement. Morning, Lottie. Welcome to Women's Hour.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. Why did you decide that you wanted to tell your story? Why write about it?
So, when I was in the depth of my grief and tough times, a book like Lucky Girl would have been so helpful to me. So I wanted to write it as an encouraging story to people, going through dark times, not necessarily just grief. Everyone comes up on tough times in their life. And I wanted to just share a positive story of how you can come through that and still create a really nice life for yourself and not be defined by tragic things that happen in your life. Because I thought for a long time that my life would be defined by those tragic things and that I wouldn't be happy again. So I just wanted it to be an encouraging story for me.
I said at the beginning of the programme, you described your life as both a fairy tale and a tragedy. And I know you've got 4.3 million followers on Instagram, but some of our listeners may not know too much about you, Lottie. So I want to just start by you telling us about your family, because you've got 7 brothers and sisters. Tell us a bit about growing up.
Yeah, so I can just remember new babies coming into my life, new siblings all the time. I'm the second oldest, and I remember we've got 2 sets of twins, so we call them the big twins and the little twins. And I remember when the big twins were born, I think I was 6, and I was just so excited because we're all baby mad, we're all really maternal in my family. I think that was put into us by my mum. So yeah, it was just like a house full of love and chaos, but I loved growing up with a big family. And we've all been the best support to each other through everything.
And then it was in 2016 that you found out the news that your mum had been diagnosed with leukemia. She was only 43, and 8 months later she passed away. And how did that impact you? It must have ruptured all of you.
Yeah, I think it was so difficult because she was the centre of everything for us, and she'd been everything was growing up. So when that gets taken away, it becomes like a job of trying to keep everything together, the way she did. So I think besides just the grief of losing your mum, it's also then, figuring out how to keep the family together and how to make sure everyone is okay.
And you were the eldest sister, so how did your role change after that?
I think when she died, I went into a natural kind of motherly mode with all the younger siblings, and it was just an instinct really that I felt, and I knew that now she was gone, I was kind of the next best thing for them, so I wanted to do everything I could to be there for them. And I love stepping into that role. Obviously I wish I'd never had to, because obviously we would always want mum to still be here, but it's given me a lot of purpose having that role, as my sister's carer and trying to just look after them and guide them through life since she passed away.
It's a lot of responsibility for an 18-year-old.
Yeah, I think it definitely was, and I think looking back, that's probably set my path for a lot of the things that I've done in my life, having that early responsibility so young. But I think also going on the tour so young taught me so much. I was 16, I'd just turned 16 when I started that tour, so I feel like I'd already kind of started maturing and gaining a few life skills that you probably wouldn't usually gain at that age. So I feel like it all just kind of rolled into one, and it was a lot of responsibility, but I don't know, I feel like it kind of moulded me into who I am.
And you mentioned going on tour. You should remind people that you are Louis Tomlinson's little sister. He's 7 years older than you. And how did your life change? What was life like before he was the Louis Tomlinson of One Direction? What was it like after?
Well, it's funny because he was always really into his music, so seeing him singing and doing music wasn't abnormal to us. So it was kind of like he was moving on from just singing at home and in little bands that he was in at home to like doing it globally, which was amazing to see, and we were all just so excited to be on the journey with him. We were just a normal family from up north, and then all of a sudden
Doncaster, let's put it out there. She's a Donny girl.
I'm proud.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it was crazy, but we were just so proud of him. We were just so happy to be on that journey with him.
And girls, fans out in your front garden when you came home from school?
Yeah, things changed pretty quickly. It was like all of a sudden, everyone at school wanted to know you, wanted to know the situation. Always people outside the house wanted to, catch a look at him. But yeah, I feel like because it's been so long now, it's kind of all I remember.
And then you were given the opportunity, because you were very into makeup, to go on tour, the work experience, but then ended up doing the whole tour, the world tour. And this changed your life.
Yeah, so when I was 16, I didn't get into sixth form, I didn't quite get the grades, and I really wanted to go to sixth form. And I think it's kind of for the wrong reasons, you know, throughout school you look at sixth formers as being like the oldest, they get to wear their own stuff, all your friends are going. So I really, really wanted to go. So when I didn't get in, I was quite disappointed and upset. But my mum said to me, look, she knew I wanted to do beauty. She was like, the best work experience you can get is going on the tour to assist the hair and makeup artists for a week. And, you know, putting that on your CV, it will open so many doors for you. So I was adamant, I was like, no, I can't do it. I was really shy and I was like, no, I don't want to go. She basically forced me on that tour. And then obviously I got on so well with the hair and makeup artist Leo, and I ended up on that tour for the next 2 years, and we toured around the whole world.
Amazing.
It's crazy that experience.
Well, great advice from you.
Yeah, she set me up, and you know, I'm so grateful to her for that.
And then after she passed away, like you said, you're only 18 and you were looking after your younger siblings, and you sort of stepped into that maternal role. And your sister Felicity, who you lovingly call Fizz, you've said in the book that she processed the grief really differently to you and your other siblings. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so I think for us it was quite apparent that she was dealing with it differently to us, you know, and that's okay, you know, everyone deals with grief differently, so we never judged her for that. But I think as the years went on, we kind of became concerned at how there was a lack of emotion there, and it kind of looked like she was suppressing her emotions quite a lot, which obviously worried us. And I think really that in the end is why she ended up in such a dark place, because by the time she did let that in, it was just too painful for her.
What was she like?
She was amazing. She was such a unique character. She was so intelligent, but so full of love, like she would do anything for you. But I feel like she had such a high intelligence. I feel like sometimes it can set you aside a little bit, because she almost had all this intelligence but didn't know what to do with it. So yeah, she was just a unique character.
And then you sadly lost Felicity as well. Where were you when you found out?
So I'd gone away actually to Bali. I'd only been there 3 days, and obviously we all know how far away that is. So to get the call whilst I was there was just heartbreaking and so scary, being so far away, you know. Obviously the first thing I wanted to do was come home, so I had to sit on that 18-hour flight, you know, with just hearing that news. So yeah, it was really, really hard time for us, and I think it was even harder knowing that, you know, we were a couple of years into the grief of my mum, and I think we all knew how hard it had been to kind of get to the point we'd got to. It almost felt like going back to square one, and it was just like we were questioning, how has this happened again?
I've been reading lots of things about you, and one thing that struck me, and you started this conversation talking about dealing with grief, and how this book is for people who you want to help people who are going through maybe something similar. And something that really struck me and really hit me hard actually was when you talked about being in a car and thinking about your sister and just having to scream.
Yeah, I remember just someone kind of opening up the conversation to me of, you know, do I want to speak about anything, do I want to talk about it? I think it was quite fresh into that grief, and all the emotions just came out of me in such a, you know, dramatic way. And obviously I think it was a different kind of grief with my sister, because it was more of a shock. You know, with my mum, of course, we'd always kept that hope that she was going to recover, but I think naturally when someone's got cancer and they're really quite ill, your brain will naturally prepare for the worst. Whereas with Fizz, we knew obviously she wasn't in a great place, but we never, you know, my mind never really went there, you know, that would happen. So I feel like I was dealing with like a lot of shock, and I guess a bit of PTSD with, you know, that shock factor and the fact I was away in the flight, like everything was, I think all just came out of me in that moment when, you know, I was asked to open up about it.
And you can come out in the most unexpected ways when you're least expecting it. You also talk about how when you moved to London in the book, that you felt you couldn't really relate to a lot of the young women because of what you'd gone through. But then you met your now fiance, Phyllis Burton, and you said that you instantly related to each other as he'd recently experienced the tragic loss. His former partner, Caroline, sadly died of suicide. Did your shared experience of grief impact your relationship?
I think it's a similar situation as I've had with the book. You know, I want to help people with my experience, and you know that place that I was in when I first found out about, you know, my mum wasn't going to make it, and you know, when you're in that depth of grief and you know, despair, that feeling that I had in that moment was that I was never going to be okay. You know, I was never going to get through it. I was never going to be happy again. You know, I was just thinking about how I would, you know, survive that grief, let alone ever live a happy life. So I think anyone that I kind of come across that's in that situation, I always want to kind of share that is possible. So yeah, it became, you know, me trying to just share that, you know, that is possible and you can be happy again. And obviously then, yeah, we ended up together, which we were friends for a long time, and then we ended up together, and now we've got almost 2 kids, so it's worked out amazing.
Yeah, I was going to say, you met Lewis, and then more joy came your way because your son Lucky was born in 2022. How was that experience, becoming a mum?
It's bittersweet really, because obviously I felt quite close to her in a way because she knew how much I wanted to be a mum. So being able to do that, I felt like I was kind of, and I knew how much being a mum meant to her as well. So being in that position made me feel close to her, but then on the flip side, I obviously had that feeling of every little question that I had, obviously she wasn't there to answer.
She was a midwife, wasn't she?
Yeah, and that kind of made it worse because a lot of medical questions that I would have, you know, she always kind of used to say to me that she would always deliver my baby when I had one. So it was really hard to come to terms with the fact that she wasn't there. I think it was like a new kind of level of the grief where we've got to kind of come to terms with it again, that they're not there for those special moments. And I guess that's probably one of the hardest parts about grief, is that realisation that, you know, those big moments in your life, you're not going to have certain people there to experience them with you.
And you've named your son Lucky. The title of the book is Lucky Girl. What does that word mean to you?
I think it's just a representation of how I've tried to turn things around, you know, things that have happened in my life. You know, turning the negatives into positives has been a big coping mechanism for me. And don't get me wrong, it's not an overnight thing. You know, if someone would have said to me at the start, look at the positives, I would have just thought that was crazy. There was no positives, and you know, even if those positives are really small, that's what I've tried to hold on to, and it's kind of given me, you know, a reason to get through everything. And you know, I had an amazing mum for 18 years. Some people don't get that, you know, ever. That's just one example of a positive that I can take from, you know, that situation. So yeah, it's just something that's kind of stuck through, you know, my life, and yeah, I just feel lucky.
And it's a great name. It's my mum's name as well. Lucky.
I know, I can't believe that. That's crazy.
Yeah, what well, it's I've really enjoyed speaking to you. Thank you for taking the time out. I'm sure your book is going to help a lot of people.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lucky Girl by Lottie Tomlinson is out now. And if you've been impacted by the things we've just been talking about, there's information and support on the BBC Action Line website. Lots of your messages coming in about losing friends or keeping friends during a divorce or a breakup. Michelle says, I think that those who drop you were never really your friends anyway, so why would you want those people in your life? Another one here saying, when my long-term partner and I split, I made it clear to our friends that we should remain friends. How wrong I was. They pretty much ghosted me, but they are still friends with my ex and his new partner. Ideas, thoughts and opinions coming in. Now, we still need your ideas for Listener Week, so please do keep them coming in to us as well. As you know, we like to cover all sorts of topics, from the serious to the fun and the quirky and the offbeat. To give you a bit of inspiration, listener Leslie got in touch with us a while back ahead of our Glastonbury programme because she wanted to tell us how she does the festival solo. It involves wearing a leotard, bright pink lipstick and parrot green hair. She was amazing. I was lucky enough to meet her in Glasgow back in June.
I have come with a group, and no one can ever agree on what stage to go to, what music to sing to. You come on your own, you can please yourself, do what you want, and you meet so many people. People talk to you when you're on your own. It's fantastic.
Not everybody could relate to that, but I think a lot of people might be terrified.
Nothing to be frightened about at all, especially in this environment. Just smile to the person next to you. Before you know, you're exchanging numbers, you're on Facebook friends. I've made so many friends over the years through coming to Glastonbury, and when we can, we meet up every year just for a quick drink and maybe a little cheeky dance.
You've got to have a cheeky dance. I think it's part of the rules of Glastonbury, you have to have a dance. Well, what is it about this place that makes it so well suited, particularly to a solo female traveller?
It's safe. Of course, you have the registration now. You can be who you want to be. You can come and go as you please. There's kids everywhere. It's such a friendly place.
You strike me as somebody who's quite confident and prepared to put yourself out there. Not every woman is like that. Stepping out and doing something solo, it's quite a daunting task. Give us some advice. How do you go about it if it's not naturally something you do?
I think the first step is to have some faith in yourself. If you do maybe start with a smaller festival, Glastonbury may be a bit overwhelming to come at first because it's so large. Maybe start with, I also go to Green Mound, which is a very small little festival in the Welsh Hills, also very family friendly. Maybe start small, but definitely start, because you will not look back. I have never looked back, and I would never ever not do this. This is my summer holiday and I love it. I'd rather this than a beach in Ibiza.
What if I said you need to come with people? How would you feel?
Not at all. I would not agree at all.
No way.
No way.
That was the Brilliant Woman's Hour listener Leslie in our special live programme from Glastonbury. So whatever your story or idea is for Listener Week, please get in touch in the usual way, 84844, or on social media at BBC Woman's Hour, or you can email us via our website. Now, when you get divorced or split up with a long-term partner, as well as dealing with the emotional pain of the separation, there are usually practical issues to untangle too. There may be legal wrangles like the question of the custody of the children or property, and assets to divide, or the pets, and so working out who gets to keep the friends might not be top of the list. When writer and counsellor Lucy Cavendish split from her partner, it took her a while to realise that the friends she'd believed she shared with him were now his and his alone. She joins me along with Rosie Wilby, comedian and author of the book The Breakup Monologues and host of the podcast of the same name, to discuss why friendships can fracture in a breakup and the politics of keeping friends. Lucy and Rosie, welcome to Woman's Hour. Lucy, I'm going to come to you first. Before your split with your partner, you were living in the countryside with your 4 children. What was your social life like?
We were really, really sociable. We had a lot of friends. I think, our children were young, and so consequently, and I think everyone does this when their children are young, you all get together, you bond, you go around to people's houses for dinner because you can take your kids, you have lunches, you go for walks, all that stuff. It was highly, highly sociable. We were a very sociable couple, and we had a lot of fun, and it was great. Really enjoyed it.
And then you did the thing of separating. How did people respond to the news?
Well, I think this is very complicated for couples, and in my job I talk to a lot of couples about this. Is number one, do you need to announce it? But how did people respond with us? I think a lot of people initially were very supportive, and then all sorts of other stuff happens. Gossip happens. I think people also got, I think they got worried, or I think they get worried about the single woman who's suddenly single. So you go from being a couple to being single. And gradually over a period of time...
Why did they worry about the single woman?
Oh, I think people worry about single women because I think lots of marriages, I'm talking very generally here, have little rocky ground and maybe not quite as stable as they'd like to be. And so a single woman is seen as a threat. And that is not where I was at all. So I noticed that people started sort of drifting away, and at first I didn't really notice it. I was like, well, we were studying the children and doing all the stuff you do when you're separating. But I then noticed that my invites were drying up. I wasn't being invited out. And I think it's because you go from this territory of being a couple, which is a sort of tribe where all couples together, and suddenly you're single. And people don't really know what to do with you. Who do they sit you next to at a dinner party? What if their husbands start talking to you and kind of fancy you? And suddenly all the ground shifts in a way that I don't think you really expect, because you're in the middle of whatever trauma you are or not going through. you know, even if you want to have it in your relationship, it's still traumatic. Especially, I think, if you're separating finances and where you live and children, and you're not really aware of what's happening with your friendship group, because that doesn't seem the top of your list until you realise everyone's disappeared.
Where have they gone?
Where have they gone? Well, they've gone into their own world, but in my case,
Between the two of you, they disappeared
Yeah,
from your
yeah,
life.
they
Did they disappear from his as well?
no, not really. And I only worked that out when I drove past a mutual friend's house, and realised there were lots of cars outside, including his. And this is no complaint against him. There's no complaint against him. And I got out of my car and kind of crawled up the bar and peeked through the window like a lunatic, and saw everyone having this wonderful time and not me.
Oh, Lucy.
Oh yeah, no, I know. Don't worry.
Why
it's
did
fine.
you do it?
Oh, why wouldn't
No,
you?
no, it's
I
true
would-
curiosity.
I believe that. Yeah, because also I'm nosy, right? I'm curious. That's what counts as a journalist are. And part of me couldn't really believe it. You know, part of me was like, no, surely that's not true. Surely I'd be invited too. And also I'm like that. I wanted to know, but wow. Sometimes you shouldn't really know the things you think you want to know.
Did you? Oh gosh, so much to talk about here. Why do you think they invited him and not you? Why did they choose him over you?
I think partially because he's a lot more likable than I am in an initial way. I'm a very direct, very honest person, and I do understand that sometimes I'm a little bit maybe too direct for people. And he was a lot more affable and a lot more sociable than me. And also, people want single male company for all sorts of reasons. You know, he was much more sociable. And I think people have a lot of single female friends, and they're like, find me a man. And, you know, he was a single spare man.
I'm going to bring...
Sorry, that's why I thought it was. Happened.
That's what you thought. Interesting. Let's bring Rosie in here. Now, Rosie, you're self-described queen of breakups. Why?
Oh, well, thank you for having me. Yes, I do describe myself as the queen of breakups because I have this podcast and I've written a book after I got dumped by email many years ago, and I joked that I did feel better once I corrected her spelling. But of course, in reality, it's such a bewildering and painful experience. But I did find that after the dust had settled, it was this opportunity for reinvention and growth and transformation. And to be honest, an opportunity to re-energize my existing friendships and go out into the world and make new ones. And so it was a really vibrant time in my life eventually. And I think my experience, contrary to Lucy's, which I'm really sorry to hear about, Lucy, I would feel hurt too in that situation. My experience is coloured by the fact that I'm a gay woman, and most of my significant relationships have been with other women. And there's been a long tradition of having very conscious breakups in that community. I believe that lesbians pioneered conscious uncoupling long before Gwyneth Paltrow. Because in a small community, you kind of have to, because you're all going to see each other, you're all going to still get together and have to deal with one another. So in that sense, if you can stay friends with your ex, then nobody really has to take a side at all, because you're all a part of the same friendship group and it doesn't all fragment and separate in that same way.
So, so if you're in a scenario, for instance, you really like your best friend's partner, they split up, is it okay to remain good friends with your ex? What if your best friend meets someone else and might that be quite awkward if you're all together? I don't know.
It can get complicated, but I do think your good friends will stick with you after a breakup, and they might decide to stick with your ex as well. And if it's not been the easiest breakup, or it's not the easiest breakup for a time, then maybe they do have to see you separately. But I do think in communities where the sense of community and family and tribe, I think in the LGBT plus community, the sense of tribe is not determined by whether you're in a couple or what kind of relationship you're in or not in. It's determined by the fact that you're LGBT and you've in some way felt a bit of an outsider perhaps as you've been growing up. Particularly if you're my age, and I've been dating since the 1990s. So that sense of community is the all important thing. So you do go through those painful experiences and try try and work them out. And we often have to seek help from people like Lucy who can counsel us.
Well, so Lucy, you've got lived experience, but you are also a counsellor. So you talk to people about this day in, day out. Is it ever, what if one party's doing it on purpose? Do you think this friends become part of the warfare of divorce or separation?
Yes, it's interesting, Rosie, you mentioned conscious uncoupling, because I'm actually a conscious uncoupling trained coach. So I looked at, so part of that is, I think breakups are very complicated, and it's really interesting what Rosie said and how it's managed. But breakups are complicated, and all sorts of very raw emotions come to the front, and it also kind of ricochets out to the people around us. And lots of people like a good old gossip, and lots of people like to get together and take sides and go, did you know that she, and all sorts of nasty stuff can come out, but also lots of very good stuff can come out. But people find that quite difficult. So I think friends, can you stay friends with both people? And I'm talking about heteronormative couples here. So
Sure.
I mean, yes, but I do think it's difficult, because when you're in pain and in hurt, this is where, and I've been very honest about myself, I wanted people to be Team Lucy. That didn't mean to say that I wanted them not to be okay about my ex, because actually we're very, we're very amicable, and he's a very good person about it. But I wanted people to be there for me.
Well, listen to this, because unsurprisingly, we're getting a lot of messages from the listeners here. I'm going to read one out because it's quite relevant to what you've just said. Many of our friends have divorced, and we've done our best to keep the friendships going. One partner will then say they won't remain friends with us unless we dump the other. Very difficult. Oh, yeah, look,
But
both of you.
that's when you're getting into the what you're really, it's going out to what are you actually saying? They're saying, I need you to be my friend and be my support. But you can't get all your friends to do that. You have to just ask, there's okay to say to people, temporarily could you back me?
Yeah.
I need to be on my side. That was, it's really complicated.
Rosie, what do you think? You took a sharp intake of breath.
I did. I'm not sure we can give our friends ultimatums, even though it's very tempting to do so. I have been guilty a lot in the past of being cross with the person who initiates the breakup, because I often feel empathy for the person who's being dumped, because that was my experience in my most painful and darkest time. So I've had to really think about that, because it does mean in heterosexual divorces, people are often cross with the woman, because 75% of them are initiated by the woman, often for very, very good reasons, of course. So I have had to understand that in any breakup, there's often two truths that are completely different, but are also true. So aside from obviously very toxic, abusive behavior, many relationships just fizzle out, and it's very difficult to stay together. Relationships are complicated. Human beings are are very, very complex. So relationships are hard, and I think we have to be understanding about our friends going through a hard time. And if I behaved badly during a breakup, I would hope that my friends would understand why I was doing that and be there.
And Lucy, is it easier for friends to veer towards the party that they can feel sorry for? Because it gives the friends a role. You can, you can swaddle them up, you can drink some wine with them. Is it easier for them rather than the person who's, seems okay?
Yes, I think that's actually true. I do think Rosie's right. I do think there is something about people being a little bit more damning towards the female part of the partnership. That's what I have experienced and found. If you've had the temerity to say, actually, I'm out of this relationship. Yeah, I think people like to be helpers. I'm not sure if men really want to swaddle people up. I think women want to swaddle them up, and there is that sisterhood of sitting in the garden or sitting in your home and opening a bottle of whatever and crying and talking, and that's quite healing and cathartic. And of course lots of friends can be great, but I do think it's a very difficult, fervent time for friends. And also you're moving from the tribe of the couple, oh look, we're a couple, to the tribe of the single, and you've suddenly got two single people rather than this thing called a couple.
Okay, and very, very quickly, because we're running out of time. Have you moved on? Have you got new friends? Are you bothered about the friends you lost?
I have friends that have been with me for a very, very long time. I think the friendships that were great and real are with me, and I think we change friendships quite a lot actually as life goes on. So some people are with you forever, and I've known one of my best friends since I was 10, and I've also met some new friends really recently, all women, hooray, who I love and adore. So yeah, happy.
Good news. Lucy Cavendish, Rosie Wilby, thank you so much for talking to me about that. Now, the soprano Golda Schultz is one of the opera world's most versatile and in-demand performers. Born in South Africa, Golda initially wanted to be a journalist, but made the leap to become a professional singer, overcoming severe stage fright. She's since studied at Juilliard Music School in New York, performed at the Proms and the Royal Opera House in London, and currently she's in Edinburgh, about to appear in the lead role in Mozart's opera Così fan tutte. Good morning, Golda. Welcome to Woman's Hour.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
We are excited. First of all, is it your first time in Edinburgh? How are you finding it?
It's my fourth time in Edinburgh, actually. I seem to not be able to stop myself from coming here, even though the weather's not exactly favourable.
Tell me about your role in Così fan tutte.
So I'm singing the role of Fiordiligi, and she's a part of a sister duo, and she and her sister are engaged to two men who decide to take up a bet with an older gentleman that says their women will be faithful no matter what. And they then dress themselves up as, some gentleman from a far off land and try to seduce their girlfriends. And, within all the chaos, the girls fail and so do the men. Everybody just messes up really badly. And so it's quite apt that you say Così fan tutte, because everybody is like that. We all make a mess if we're not careful with other people's feelings.
Yeah, it's interesting that they put women at the centre of this, and the suggestion is that women are always unfaithful or fickle. How do you approach that?
It's very difficult